Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell.
Yo, microphone check 1 2 3 4 5. Microphone check 1 2 3 4 5. What's going on, everybody? Here, I'm checking in here for July 6th, 2026, and I'm still recovering and stuff like that from being out at the Wolstein Center in Cleveland, Ohio. Well, actually, I'm still in Cleveland, or basically in the Cleveland area here. So I ain't really getting back into the home base until tomorrow. But we are going to talk about a number of things here when it comes to the fights that took place at the Wolstein Center, Cleveland State University, including the WBO lightweight title fight that happened between Abdullah Mason and Albert Bell. The scene was a very good scene there, I guess, for the city of Cleveland. Great turnout. Over 10,000 people were in attendance for that particular event. The Wolstein Center, hey, listen, I ain't been in this is the first time I ain't been out in Cleveland anyway. You know what I mean? But that particular arena there is a capacity of over 13,000. So for them to have this be a fight, kind of like first fight around that particular venue, to have 10,000 people, over 10,000 people for this particular event, and with it being Albert Bell as a late replacement, that was a pretty good situation there for top rank or whatever it is. But my thing about it was not only the live scene, but also maybe how it looked for those that were watching live on TV. Yes, they said it would be on the zone, but it also said that it was going to be live on TNT. This is the first presentation of the fight. That is something that they were going to have as a series once a month there on TNT. And yes, it was also on True TV as well. But, they kind of do that thing there when it comes to Turner Sports. But with this one here, I wanted to see like how people, kind of like received that that presentation, how things looked on TV. Because in the stadium, as far as like the crowd, it was okay. There are a couple of things that kind of like was messed up there. I don't know how the Wolstein Center has like freaking vendors and barely has like any concessions out there, because lines for the concessions was crazy the whole time, but it was, looked like it was, packed. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say packed like that, but I'll say there's a number of people that didn't like sit down or something, because man, they were just standing around just looking at the fights. There are some folks that were sitting down, and a whole bunch of folks that were just standing around, and there was like no, what I would say, no security folks or no people there that like say, hey, you gotta have to move from here and go to your seat and all that type of stuff. You didn't even see all of that there, me being there live. But as far as like the fights, the fights. Oh man, I was thinking, or had higher expectations there from the fighters that were on the A side there for this fight card. Now you did have some good performances there from a couple of the fighters and everything like that, but when you kind of like pick that you wanted to see a number of stoppage victories to take place and they didn't take place, then yeah, you kind of like kind of pretty surprised about those actual results. But what we're going to do is we're going to be starting off with the main event there, of course, with that WBO lightweight title on the line. Abdullah Mason making his first defense of that title. Once again, he's making that first defense of that world title there against Albert Bell. Yeah, he was supposed to be fighting Joe Cordina. That was his scheduled opponent there, but Cordina had a visa issue of sorts, so he was not able to be there in this event. So that's why you had Albert Bell, who was slated to fight Andy Cruz on July 18th for the final IBF Eliminator bout there in the lightweight division. But he had this opportunity here to fight for and win a world title, going up against Abdullah Mason, the youngest world champion that's out there in boxing, and he, took on that chance. Okay, we talked about what to look for in this particular fight, given that it is Albert Bell instead of a Joe Cordina, with Albert Bell being there at 6 feet in the lightweight division. So you had Abdullah Mason see how he would be able to make the proper adjustments there, in this particular fight. And in those first few rounds, you did see a really good scrap between these two. Okay, you did see, Abdullah Mason getting caught a few times with counters there from Albert Bell, and Albert Bell actually using his height there to, get the better of Abdullah Mason. And, for some, they kind of like seen the scorecards out there, and it looked like, it was pretty even out there within the first 4 or the first 6 rounds, right? But what you did see, though, was in the second half of the fight with Abdullah Mason, making the proper adjustments, making the moves that he needed to make there as far as like being able to walk down Albert Bell, because Albert Bell, he's there at 6 feet, but he is more of a tactician type of a style. That's why you did see there going into this fight, he was 28-0 with 9 of those wins by way of knockout. So you see that he has a number of instances where he outpoints a number of his opponents there. But you need something for at least for Abdullah Mason to have something to respect you. And so while you did see Abdullah Mason get caught a couple of times, he kind of like made those proper adjustments, especially when he was trying to walk down Albert Bell to where he's not necessarily right there in front of you or not necessarily stationary. So I'll talk about that here in detail as if you had a guy there that's 6 feet, yeah, he's going to try to use his length and his reach against you, but it's going to be something. It would be one thing to kind of like stand upright while you're trying to walk down your opponent, but you kind of like seeing Abdullah Mason use movement as far as like, being up and down, kind of crouching down a little bit, moving to the side or like leaning over to the side, to his left, to his right, to where if you had Albert Bell using his jab, right, he couldn't necessarily do that as far as like throwing a straight jab. He would have to either punch down, punch over to the side, or, try to set up Abdullah Mason to try to catch him. Now, he didn't necessarily have to do that in those first couple of rounds, but in, coming from like the 7th round on, you did see those different looks there from Abdullah Mason, and you also seen the same intensity there from Abdullah Mason that you did see in the first half of the fight. And a number of those punches, came with bad intentions there. Hey, you got, of course, a topic there in the building, checking in to, I guess react to, what happened there in the fights on Saturday night. But wanted to, get in depth on that thing as far as like what was happening there in the second half, because I think with Abdullah Mason facing Albert Bell, he was able to show different elements of his game that maybe you didn't, or maybe some fight fans didn't have the opportunity to see him do against a number of his opponents. It's funny because you had the thing there with Abdullah Mason in the past. Yes, he did win that WBO title in his bout against Sam Noakes last November. He did have the thing there with Jeremiah Nakathila where he just beat him up. Like Nakathila didn't really give him much resistance at all. Like a number of people really didn't see much as far as like people or fighters or opponents really throwing back at Abdullah Mason since the Johan Vasquez fight, which, you had that round 1 that was, basically round of the year there in 2024, but outside of that, you hadn't really seen that much resistance out there from another of the opponents there for Abdullah Mason. So with Albert Bell being able to do that, that kind of like shows that, okay, there's still a few things that you might have to tweak here and there, but he, was still able to make the proper adjustments in order to finish Albert Bell. Topic says, Abdullah Mason still a youngin', flawless performance for a last minute opponent switch. Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is like, they said like, with Albert Bell, he was, preparing for, fighting the Andy Cruz. It's one thing to kind of like prepare for Andy Cruz, but it's another thing to, prepare for an Abdullah Mason where, he's kind of like offensive based in comparison to, Andy Cruz's defensive based. And I know we had some folks that have been on here on the podcast, making comments in reference to this particular fight for Abdullah Mason versus Albert Bell, likely being, a better matchup than Abdullah Mason versus, Joe Cordina. But, we probably would have said that this particular matchup would be better than seeing Albert Bell versus Andy Cruz. Because if you got a guy in Andy Cruz that's, technical, of course, having a Cuban background and everything like that, and then you have Albert Bell, being, having the style that he has, then, hey, you could have definitely, bet on a decision for that fight if that fight, took place. But here, you know that you were going to get at least some type of action that either you're going to see a fighter, have his experience and make his experience be the difference in the fight, or you're going to see the young champion being able to, overcome and overwhelm, the more experienced fighter there in Albert Bell. And, that's what we basically saw there. Going from the scorecards that they had up to that point, through 11 rounds, 2 judges had it 107, 102, and one other judge had it 106 to 103, right? So it basically had Abdullah Mason winning the fight going into the last round. The closest score basically had it I would say 7 rounds to 4, basically. I would kind of like say it would be 7 rounds to 4. But outside of that, that's kind of like what I saw was, Abdullah Mason in the second half of the fight really turned it up as far as like his offense. You seen him, work the body of Albert Bell a lot there to kind of like break down his movement to kind of slow him down a little bit. And then, in the 12th round, you basically seen that, they, dapped it up, and then all of a sudden, like, Abdullah Mason blitzed Albert Bell and was able to score a knockdown within the first 10 seconds of the 12th round, right? And so when Albert Bell got up, he was able to, get up, fairly early from the count. And then, like a few seconds later, after, going to the other side of the ropes and kind of like getting hit with a few shots. Now, there was like another couple of punches that didn't necessarily land all too hot, but you still had Albert Bell, go down on one knee there for the second knockdown of the 12th round. But at that point, you kind of like see Mark Nelson, say, hey, what, I'm waving it off. He didn't really count. He just waved it off. So it kind of like gave Abdullah Mason the TKO victory there, but a number of I guess fight fans that were watching, you were saying that Mike Nelson kind of like waved it early and should have gave Albert Bell opportunity to finish off the round, or see if he could finish off the round, or if it had it to where Abdullah Mason could have a definitive finish. A lot of times fight fans want to see a definitive finish from a fighter that was able to either have a good performance, or have it to where maybe he gets back in the fight and he's able to score knockdowns to get back in the fight. But you want to at least have something where you say, okay, yeah, this is it. Like, the opponent can't really do nothing no more. He ain't getting up, none of that type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like how some people said that Xander Zayas didn't choose to get up from one knee after getting knocked down multiple times from Boots Ennis. Nah, this wasn't quite like that. This is kind of different on that part. Topic asks, can you give a grade for each fight performance on the card? Okay, I'm going to see if I can. All right. As far as like, the 4 main fights that were on, TNT, True TV, and the Zone. I'm going to do that. So we're going to go with, of course, here real quick with what we had for this particular fight with Abdullah Mason and Albert Bell. Abdullah Mason, I felt like he did a great job in this one. You're going up against a guy that had almost 30 pro fights, which you kind of like seen that in Abdullah Mason's previous fights before. He's fought guys that have had around 25 pro fights, 30 pro fights, and things like that, where either he is able to get a stoppage or have something like I said with his bout against Johan Vasquez, where he had to go through some, as they say, growing pains. But here you kind of like see his overall development and how to respond here while just having 21 professional bouts. So I think with this particular performance here from Abdullah Mason, I give him an A on that. I think that you could see that he has the he has the tools to really compete with anybody that's out there in the lightweight division right now, despite being 22. He turned 22 earlier this year. So he still has a few things that you'll be able to see from him here. And hey, we know that he's not necessarily going to be in the 135-pound division for his whole career. Like I just don't see that. So what I see is him looking to get more fights out there at 135, and kind of like doing this thing there at 135 here for maybe a year and a half before they consider having them going up to the 140-pound division. Now I did kind of like talk about that with Abdullah Mason after the fight, saying like what he like to do there within 135 and 140 as far as like sending a message or something like that. But we still have a few things that have to sort itself out there within 135, right? Now, as of right now, we only have 2 world champions. That's right, 2 world champions in the 135-pound division. The IBF title is vacant, and you have the WBA title. Yeah, that's right, the WBA title that is vacant. They finally made the decision there when it came to that WBA lightweight title. Y'all know who the WBA lightweight champion was, and I'll talk about that particular person here in a bit. But that kind of like shows you only have 2 definitive world champions there, Abdullah Mason and Raymond Murataya. Now, of course, Murataya had his defense against Andy Cruz earlier this year, won by decision. Okay, we will have it to the point where we could get a WBC lightweight champion on August 1st. There you got, of course, Lamont Roach Jr. versus William Zepeda. That's going to be happening in Vegas. That is the next presentation of the fight that's going to be on TNT for y'all to tune in. All right. So, with that being said, you got Abdullah Mason that's there as a WBO champion. You got Raymond Murataya there. That is the champion there for the IBF. Excuse me. So you had WBC and WBA vacant. Murataya and Abdullah Mason are currently signed with Top Rank. So folks who like say, hey, man, you got those 2 world champions. You should go ahead and try to get, them 2 to unify. Well, at least from my perspective or from what I've seen, especially over the past couple of years, there hasn't really been much movement to have these fighters unify. You've had, of course, with the 130-pound division, you have O'Shaquie Foster that's been the champion that's looked to unify against Emmanuel Navarrete, and that didn't necessarily happen. You had Navarrete end up unifying against, Eduardo Sugar Nunez. And Nunez is there under Matchroom, but you got O'Shaquie Foster that's right there under Top Rank, and they can't even get their unification. So here with Ray Murataya and Abdullah Mason, given that Ray Martaya, had his thing there as far as like his mandatory defense. He could go ahead and have a unification bout if he wanted to seek it, but it would be against Abdullah Mason. And the thing about it is would they have it to where Abdullah Mason is the lead person in that fight card or in that fight? Like, for example, would they have Abdullah Mason versus Ray Martaya in Cleveland? I doubt it. So they're gonna have to have something else probably in the plans there for Abdullah Mason to make another defense of the title. With Joe Cordina, yes, he's ranked number one, but it looks like here that they may be having plans to have Joe Cordina fight in the UK. So if that's going to be happening, then you would have to have like another fighter that's out there in the rankings where Abdullah Mason could go ahead and make that defense. Now, I know that there was some comments out there. I can't necessarily, go word for word, what they say, word for word, bar for bar. But I had seen that there was something in reference to Floyd Schofield having comments about him saying, "Oh, that stoppage was, premature and all that type of stuff." Right now, I ain't even gonna really get too much on that. Let me see here, man. Oh, I think hopefully I'll be able to share it because it'll show the post right here, man. It'll show the post. So usually I'm able to show the post or share it on the screen for those that are watching, right? So let me see here if I'm able to get this on the screen for those that are able to see it. But yeah, there it is. There it is right there. It says, "What punch landed? That ref should be investigated and bank accounts should be looked at. Mason would have won, but we don't need that white shit the ref had done." Like, come on, man. Oh man. Let me see. So that right there, yeah, that's crazy, Let me see here. So that is, what you got, there from that. Now, the thing about it is like, hey, that is, comments there from Floyd Schofield, but that there was like some time, what was it, last year, where that particular fight could have been in the cards, but I guess Schofield was asking for a certain price tag that wasn't going to be that wasn't going to happen. But here we are. We got this thing here with Abdullah Mason. He's the one that was able to be in position to fight for and win the WBO lightweight championship. While on the flip side there with Floyd Schofield Jr., it was looking like he was supposed to be in line to fight for the WBA lightweight championship. And as I mentioned before, a number of people know who the WBA lightweight champion was, but eventually that title has been vacated. Now, we don't even know if there's any move for that WBA title to be fought for. Like, they haven't really said anything as far as like saying, hey, the top contenders should go ahead and face each other for that vacant WBA title. Nothing. You know what I mean? Shout out to Secret Dance Move. It says, hey, Mason showed that he is a future elite boxer. Hey, yeah, he did. Being there live watching it, I said that Abdullah Mason there showed elements of a fighter that could turn it up to the next level when he needs to, and that he kind of like showed that he has elements of, things that other young fighters or fighters that, only have like a certain amount of fights, but have already won world titles. They haven't necessarily shown that yet, or they've shown parts of it, but they haven't really like, followed up on it. It says elite boxers can adapt and change when they're losing a fight. Mason showed that. Yeah, showed that you can have a plan B, a plan C, where you see that he's not, necessarily successful in what he's doing, and makes adjustments on that. And it kind of like shows like what they've done, in the ring or outside the ring or in the gym. Now, what you've seen from Abdullah Mason was what I like to see from young fighters that you could see that if they've been successful against a number of opponents doing one particular thing, then that would be one element. But when that isn't necessarily successful, or when they have like some type of resistance, then you got to see if they're going to be able to make adjustments on that. And if they do, then you'll see how they kind of like are part of that next level type of thing. You know what I mean? Said like, hey, you're still raw right now, but it'll be something in a couple more years. His wins over Sam Noakes and Albert Bell will age like fine wine. Yeah. Yeah, speaking of that, I think they said something about Sam Noakes. Maybe I don't know if they said if Sam Noakes was a potential opponent for Joe Cordina, but I kind of like seen that as um oh, what was it? Oh, that ring show joint. They said that it could be that part of a Matchroom versus Queensbury 7v7. Okay, so we had Joe Cordina versus Sam Noakes. That could be a pretty interesting fight. You know what I mean? Be an interesting fight. And like, hey, it says that you would rather see Abdullah Mason get wins over unbeaten guys than past their best world champions, or those that are on the decline. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they do have those type of fights though. Like for example, with Xander Zayas. Before he became WBO champion and WBA champion, he fought a former WBO champion in Patrick Teixeira, right? So you do have those instances where, like, you see a number of these fighters face former world champions. Or, what was it, like some time back, Jared Anderson fought Charles Martin, former IBF heavyweight champion, right? Those are like the thing or fights that kind of like show either like if you're a valid or solid contender, or that you're ready to fight for a world championship. So sometimes you do have matchmakers do, put those fights together, for guys that are building up their record, being undefeated and trying to, get closer to that world title shot. So I think here with Abdullah Mason, he didn't necessarily have that here, of course, because of the circumstances that happened last year over in Norfolk, Virginia. So because of that, they made the adjustments and said, hey, let's put Abdullah Mason in here against Sam Noakes in November. And he ended up winning that fight, becoming WBO lightweight champions. So that is, how things are right now, you know. But, at least you kind of like see what, Mason is able to do against, different guys and different styles and things like that. I really would want to see what they do have next for him, especially given that he was able to have over 10,000 people in attendance at the Wolstein Center, on Saturday night. I think that, a unification bout isn't going to be in the cards next. I don't see them doing that unless there's like some circumstances within their what I would say, their network agreement with the zone that says, hey, we got these dates, or we got these slots available for you. See what you could put together on these fight cards. So you're gonna have Top Rank having some work to do. You know what I mean? With Carl Moretti out there, with their president that's out there, they're gonna have some work to do as far as like, having dates and having fights to put these fight cards together. Because, what have we had here so far? This is their second event that they've had, while being under the DAZN deal. So the first one was there at Norfolk with Keyshawn Davis and Nahir Albright, that rematch, and then this one here with um, Abdullah Mason and Albert Bell. So now we got to see what would be next out there for Top Rank. If they're gonna be able to put something else, here for later this year, I want to see if they could have at least two more cards. So maybe we could have that. I mean, we got May, July. Maybe we could have something in September, and maybe November. But given what has happened here, in the past 6 to 12 months, a number of their fighters, have been kind of like, as they say, leased out to a number of these bigger cards. So if that continues to happen, then what does that mean for Top Rank as far as like having actual dates to put on the zone? We'll see. But y'all could go ahead and check out the roster out there for Top Rank, and you could, make your assumptions or predictions as to, what potential fights could happen under the Top Rank banner. But at least for right now, you do have, Abdullah Mason that's there for him. You got Keyshawn Davis that's there for him. You seen Emiliano Vargas that was involved on the matchroom card. What was that? The previous weekend. So that kind of like says, hey, this is what we got, and what can we do with it? We'll see. But for Abdullah Mason, hopefully this is some good momentum for him. They might look to have some more events out there for Abdullah Mason in Cleveland. As far as like having them there in the Cavs Stadium, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. That remains to be seen. That would be something for like if he does get a unification bout with a Ray Murataya. But outside of that, I really don't see that happen. Okay. But I want to see the thing there with Abdullah Mason being very active too. I know that he's now the WBO champion, but we saw Abdullah Mason fighting 4 times last year. The year before that, we saw him, fight, pretty much around that same thing, around 5 times. Now this is, his first fight in 2026. Like we can't have it to where, okay, because of this these network deals and all this other stuff, that these fighters are now only fighting once or twice a year. He said Mason will probably get only one more fight in 2026. And see that's the bad part about it. Like, I mean, you can't be having that, man. Like, you gotta see about having them making another, voluntary defense. Like, get I don't know, man. Get Dimitri Salita on the phone to see if Joshua Pagan is available. You know what I mean? Like, say, hey, we got this here opportunity for you to, fight for, and potentially win a world title. But we got to hear, against Abdullah Mason. You know what I mean? And like I said, if they end up having it to where, you have a number of these fight fans in the Ohio area showing up, then that should tell you that, hey, we could have something good here. Josh Pagan did have his last fight over in Grand Rapids, Michigan, on a Salita Promotions card. So, and yeah, he's there at 16-0. Another fighter there that's around 5'10". But hey, if y'all want to go ahead and have these fights happen as often as possible for these fighters, why not, kind of like make that happen? Yeah, I did great. The performance, man. You missed it, man. I said that, Abdullah Mason, I gave him an A, for him to, make the proper adjustments there after those first 6 rounds. And I said that, the way that he kind of like closed off the ring or, tried to, basically fight off of his front foot against Albert Bell, that he was able to properly break down Bell in order to get the stoppage there in the 12th round, but also really hurt Bell in a number of those instances from the 10th and the 11th round. So he kind of built up to that point to get those knockdowns in the 12th, So I kind of like said that he, did a very good job there on that front. Okay. Now, thing there with Albert Bell, he did, perform well in those first 6 rounds, but from what I was hearing it, some people were looking at it and saying like, hey, yeah, he was in the gym, but he wasn't in the gym for as long as he could have been. Like his the thing is, it's like it's one thing to be a step in opponent, right? But it's another thing to be a step in opponent to be ready sooner than what you were going to be ready at. You know, so his remember Albert Bell's schedule was scheduled to fight on July 18th. So now you kind of like push up your schedule or your training schedule by 2 weeks. So it's not only that, as I mentioned, you're going up against Abdullah Mason. Um, you're not going up against Andy Cruz. So the thing about it is, at least for me, how I view things as far as like preparation for fights, you got to be able to have the resources required in order to properly prepare for opponents, no matter their experience level, no matter their status in the respective division or whatever it is. So if you know that you're going to prepare for a world title fight, this is something that you've been looking for ever since you were the top contender or a top contender in the 130-pound division. Like, you really have to amp it up and step it up to a next level. I know that there was like the opportunity out there with the Andy Cruz fight, but it's completely different when you're going up against someone like Abdullah Mason, who, yeah, he's a younger fighter. Yeah, you have had a couple of sparring sessions with him, in the past, but it's a completely different thing because you never know when you will have another opportunity to fight for a world title. But maybe there could be something in the works for him later on down the line. I wanted to catch up on these comments here. Secret Dance Move says that I don't even think it was an early stoppage. Bell was done after that second knockdown, pretty much like it was his energy level, there that was significantly diminished there after like round 10 and round 11. You know what I mean? So I would say that, on that front, maybe some people felt like it was it was warranted. Apparently, Floyd Schofield Jr. didn't think so, but I mean that's Floyd Schofield Jr. You'd like to see Mason fight the winner of Roach versus Payton next. Again, that's for the vacant WBC title, and um, unless unless we had something where Turner Sports or the people within Turner Sports would have a say on it, then you likely won't have a unification bout. Because, I mean, remember I said you have two guys that are within top rank right now that have world championships in the lightweight division. But as you can see, I'm not looking to see if that's going to be happening next, but we shall see. I mean, topic in here saying that Abdullah Mason is a 22-year-old kid who normally would be in the building phase, showed that he has the skills to pay the bills against an undefeated contender, and that Mason started to take the fight out of Bell in the second half of the fight. Yeah. You kind of like see those elements there from Abdullah Mason, and like the scouts there at Top Rank seen it from him, from the some time back. I think they seen it there from him in 2024. They were talking about him. It's like prospect, hot rising prospect, number one prospect. Like I said, I mean I've had him as prospect of the year, 1 year. But I think that fight that he had against Johan Vasquez said that, hey, despite the mistakes there, despite being knocked down twice there in that first round, that he was able to calm himself down, recollect himself, and then get back get back in the mix. And then ever since then, I don't think he's really like lost, but a few rounds here and there outside of the Sam Noakes fight, which was, 7 rounds to 5 with 2 scorecards. Like he really hasn't, had much to really worry about against a number of the opponents that he's, faced since then. So I think that, with him, it could be sky's the limit for him. It's just all about how they're going to be able to build him up after this. And, like it was mentioned earlier, we may only see him one more time this year, but we'll see how that goes. And yes, Zepeda is with Golden Boy. You do have the whole thing with Golden Boy Promotions there for William Zepeda. Lamont Roach there under Pro Box Promotions, formerly of Golden Boy Promotions. I think they may have a TGB also involved with that particular fight coming up August 1st. But I think, but what you are seeing there is like I said with what's coming up August 1st. You're having a number of these fight cards that are involving multiple fighters from multiple promotional companies, going up and matching up against each other. And I think, that was something that a number of fight fans wanted to see, is these fighters that are, within these other promotional companies fight each other. But, either whether it's through reluctance or resistance or resources, it didn't happen. Now you're seeing it happen over these past couple of years, whether it's through Turki Al-Sheikh, Sayla, or whatever, but you're seeing it happen, and I think you're gonna see, more of these things, go down here in order to, try to mix things up for, the sport of boxing. Should be a good thing for boxing, but what does it mean overall for these promotional companies? I don't know. We have to see how it goes with that, but that's most of the stuff there that I wanted to talk about with Abdullah Mason and Albert Bell. Outside of Albert Bell having a couple of people of interest in his corner there for this fight. I'm not sure if y'all noticed, if y'all were watching on The Zone or TNT or True TV, but when Jimmy Lennon Jr. was giving the announcements and the rundown for Albert Bell. Oh my God, American Airlines strikes again. Okay, yeah. Oh my God, I tell you, I hate American Airlines, man. I put that on wax. I hate American Airlines. I really don't. If I can help myself, I would never be on American Airlines ever again. But that's a whole nother story. All right. So, with Albert Bell being announced, thereby Jimmy Lennon Jr. Yep, you did see a Mr. Sam Watson. Now, before I headed over to the Wolstein Center for the fight card, I was at the hotel for, where they had the events for this fight card. Okay. And when I was there, I was chilling out and then, charging up the, the electronic devices and all that type of stuff. And then all of a sudden I look over and I say, hey, wait a minute. Is that Sam Watson over there? It's like, yeah. It's like, oh, hey, what's up there, Sam? Hey, what's going on? I was like, oh, so Sam Watson's here with somebody. And then here it is, like a couple of minutes later, while I'm headed over to the arena, you have a post. Oh, man, let me see if I can find it. You have a post there coming from Premier Boxing Champions. I was like, oh, my God. Come on, man. So you had the whole thing there, and you had PBC with a post. Oh, man, and it said that PBC is rocking with Albert Bell as he aims to capture Abdullah Mason's WBO lightweight world title tonight. Let's go, Albert. Oh, man. So you did see Sam Watson, and I think I saw a Mr. Ravon Littlejohn also there ringside with him. So yeah, Albert Bell is a PBC fighter, and you know what? I like that. I think that is great. I think we could have a few things happen there with Albert Bell under PBC or TGB promotions or whatever it is, right? Because you could have a few fights that are still out there for Albert Bell within the lightweight division. Um, as an example, if a certain fighter wins on July 25th or July 26th, whatever date you want to call it, you could have potentially Albert Bell versus Stephen Fulton at 135 pounds. So we'll see, but I think that was some interesting news there before that fight took place. Shout out to Dante Boxing Talk here on the live chat. I'm liking y'all participating on the live chat here for the Boxing Source podcast. He said that Abdullah Mason got outboxed 6 rounds and went the war with notes. Keyshawn and Shakur don't lose rounds, and guys be like, oh goodness, Mason looks good. Interesting. Here's the thing, right? We know that Shakur Stevenson is a pound for pound talent. We know that Keyshawn Davis was the WBO lightweight champion before, what happened over in Norfolk, Virginia last year. The thing is that you have these guys that are all undefeated, but fight fans, there are a good number of fight fans that are fans of fighters that will finish their opponents, like finish them off, leave no doubt, end them, have the fight stopped, all that type of stuff, right? We don't necessarily get that from Shakur Stevenson. Does he overwhelm his fighters? Like, yes. Did he have a great performance against Teofimo Lopez? Yes. I feel like he could have stopped Teofimo Lopez. That's me. And for Shakur Stevenson, at least for me, I feel like Shakur Stevenson to get to that level of, okay, we really want to see Shakur Stevenson fight, he could have had that opportunity happen there in that particular stage against Teofimo Lopez at Madison Square Garden. But it didn't necessarily happen. I mean, it is what it is, but we'll see. As far as Shakur Stevenson and what could happen next for him, who knows? Depends on the opponent that they have lined up, which could be rumored to be a grudge match of sorts. But we'll see. Okay. When it comes to Keyshawn Davis, as he says, the amazing Keyshawn Davis, he's had those elements of hey, he could try to step it up to that next level. I did want to see that there when he had the rematch against Tahir Albright. He had the stoppage win over Jermaine Ortiz at Madison Square Garden, and then he has a rematch here against Tahir Albright after Albright had that draw against Frank Martin in February, right? There was nothing that Tahir Albright could have really done to really beat Keyshawn Davis. Watching that fight. But I wanted to see Keyshawn Davis go to that next level of saying hey, you don't really belong in the ring with me at any shape, form, or fashion. And we didn't necessarily see that. I want to see what's going to be next year for Keyshawn Davis because, yeah, you did have the World Boxing Organization order Keyshawn and Devin Haney. But we're about a couple of weeks, well, not even a couple of weeks in, but we should be about 7 days from the time that they did order that. And they said they had about 20 days for them to go through negotiations. And if not, then you go to a purse bid. Let's see what happens with that. Shout out to my guy, Thomas Hill in the building, man, the Source of Boxing, man. Hey, Thomas, man, you missed out, man. You was out here in Cleveland, man, and your guy, man, Big Dre was out here too, man. To check out what was going on with the fights. So, we had a couple of folks from the JBT that were out here. I didn't see what was it, D1. I wasn't able to see D1 out here though. But he did make it. But yeah, that's kind of the whole. I kind of went down the whole situation there with the lightweight division and with what happened there with Albert Bell and Abdullah Mason. That's been about an hour. I'm almost off for an hour about it. That's something. And I still haven't gotten through the other three fights. So we're gonna do that. Co-feature bout: WBC Featherweight Championship. Bruce Shoo Shoo Carrington versus Renee Palacios. Okay. Um. Now, again, with Bruce Carrington, this was his first. Okay. This was his first defense of that WBC featherweight title. Okay. Shout out to Jimmy Lennon Jr., Hall of Fame announcer, one of the most recognizable announcers in the game, probably second to, of course, your Mr. Let's Get Ready to Rumble himself, right? But multiple times, Jimmy Lennon Jr. said that Bruce Carrington was making his second defense of the WBC featherweight title when he won the WBC featherweight title in January 31st. What I'm saying is, Jimmy Lennon Jr., he's kind of going, he's slipping. He's slipping. I'll just say he's slipping, all right? He's slipping. But anyway, Bruce Carrington versus Renee Palacios. Bruce Carrington is there as the WBC champion, and he's built his way up to get to that particular point to try and fight for and win a world title. He got that. He won a world title. Got the stoppage there against Carlos Castro, right? Now he's going up against Renee Palacios, who yes is undefeated or came into this bout undefeated, right? But he had his last bout against Suleiman Sagawa on a pro box card there at Maryland Live. I was there at that fight card. I was there for that fight. I watched that fight live, and man, I thought that Palacios was going to end up losing by decision. That didn't happen. He won by split decision, and one particular judge had it 9 rounds to 1 in favor of Renee Palacios. I'm here to tell you right now, there was no way that Renee Palacios won 9 rounds against Suleiman Sagawa, and I felt like Suleiman Sagawa should have got a little bit more credit for all of that. So, we'll see, man. But yeah, I see the comments here from Secret Dance Move. But I kind of agree with you on one thing, but disagree with you on another. But it's kind of be here a little bit later. My guy L Dub Boxing in the building. Shout out to L Dub Boxing. Y'all check him out. My guy over J there. So I'll post up that comment there from Secret Dance Move in a bit, right? But when you talk about this thing here with Bruce Carrington and Renee Palacios, when I was going into this particular fight, and as I mentioned with Palacios having this fight against Suleiman Sagawa, I thought this would be a fight for Bruce Carrington to kind of show hey, yes, I'm here at the 126-pound division, and I've been trying to get fights with other top guys within the division. I've been saying that I wanted to fight with Rafael Espinoza for almost a year now. I wanted to see if I could get in the mix here with a guy like Angelo Leo, who's an IBF champion, and this fight here, against Renee Palacios, who he was there as a contender, but I just didn't feel like he was a guy that could really be a serious threat, So we'll see. But here, I thought that given the background of Bruce Carrington, I would have saw a lot more. I'm getting there, man. Come on, man. I'm getting there. I'm getting there as far as this performance, man. Come on, don't be rushing me, man. Come on. I'm trying to give an in-depth analysis of what I saw from Bruce Carrington against Renee Palacios. Okay, now So I thought within those first couple of rounds that he was going to be able to, be very sharp with the jab and kind of like had Palacios really, set back there with that particular jab and then try to work from that. But I didn't see that second element to say, okay, now let's turn it up. Now let's, get to this next level. Let's show that this guy should not be in the same ring with me. I just, I didn't see that. And so that's how you got those instances or those moments that you've seen in the, in that moment where he ended up being down to the canvas. Said it was like a hit to the back of the head, but someone says, how was that hitting the back of the head when it was when it was Bruce character that turned his head? And somebody said that. They said, hey, it's one thing to say that it was not a legal shot. But, once, your an opponent throws or starts to throw the punch and you end up ducking down, so it ends up it ends up landing in the back of the head, then it should still count as a legal punch. I mean, oh man. So, for that, I say that was, one part where, he was slipping. And then the other instance was what, like that 10th round or whatever it was, where he, got hit with a body shot that was a good body shot. In that he, wanted to, maneuver, around that, kind of like get his bearings back, for the rest of that particular round. So, for me, I wasn't like all too, high with this performance. I pretty much like say it was, I would say a C or a C minus. And Bruce Carrington himself pretty much said like it wasn't a good performance. I have posted up his post fight, presser or whatever it is where he talked about that. He was not happy with what he was doing. I don't know about his energy that was looking off for that, but that was one thing that kind of, I guess maybe there was something going on, but I just didn't see it. At least for me, I didn't really see it that much. So on that instance, maybe he'll have to do a few more things, but I think maybe he might have to make something, make some adjustments here and there, further down the line. But still, shout out to Bruce Carrington there. Anyway, he was able to get this unanimous decision win. One judge had it 10 rounds to 2, another judge had it 9 rounds to 3, another judge had it 8 rounds to 4. In favor of Bruce Carrington there. So like I said, I still had like a C performance. I think he really has a few things that he needs to do. I would like to see if they match him up against Nick Ball, maybe, former WBA champion. I don't know if they could, make that matchup happen, but for me, it looks like, again, when I was talking about this thing here with Top Rank in their deal with the zone and everything like that, it's one thing to have that network deal. It's another thing to try to get fights or make fights happen and make full fight cards happen. So if you look again, I said check out their roster, look at who they have, see if they've headlined events before, or if they potentially could headline events here and see if that could continue here while being under Top Rank. I mean, I don't know if they could do something with Bruce Carrington, but like say for example, can Bruce Carrington headline the fight card at the theater at Madison Square Garden? Would they be able to make that happen? I don't know. But that's got to be something that's potentially in the works for Top Rank if they want to, go ahead and fill out these dates for the zone. But for Bruce Carrington, I don't know. He says he thinks that Nick Ball might beat Bruce Carrington off of that performance, man. He said it also Shu will have his lights put out against Espinoza. Man, hey, listen, man. Espinoza, with what he's been doing in his past few fights, he's looking like the clear number one featherweight, and it's by a good margin. Yes or no, Brandon Figueroa was able to score that knockout victory over Nick Ball in the last round of that fight, but Rafael Espinoza has been pretty much on the tear in his last few fights. So he's looking real hot. For Bruce though, I feel like he does need to do some work, but says shoe ready for anyway. Oh yeah, I'll get on that thing there too. the thing. Shout out to L Dub there. He says, shout out to open scoring. Should have it in all championship fights to keep the judges accountable. Okay, hey, let's get into that a little bit, right? Now I didn't necessarily hear it because they said that they had the open scoring and they announced it for the 4th round and the 8th round. I didn't hear it for the 4th round, but I heard it for the 8th round. And when they had the scores there for the 8th round and they showed like how far ahead that Bruce Carrington was, I was like, oh man, this fight over, bro. This fight over, bro. So I was like, man, unless Palacios was going to be able to score a knockdown or something like that, an actual knockdown that was going to be counted, he wasn't going to be able to get back in the fight. And for me, sometimes the open scoring, especially if the fighters hear it, and if you're like in a significant lead, you could react a certain way against your opponent. And if you're significantly behind, then you would have to, see if you can make an adjustment to get those knockdowns. Or if the corner would have something to say, hey, we got to get these knockdowns, So open scoring, it could be, there's pluses and minuses to everything. But that open scoring, especially after that 8th round when they had Bruce Carrington way ahead, it was a wrap. You know what I'm saying? It was a wrap. What else it says there? It said something about Brandon Figueroa going to Japan in October. Oh, man. I don't even know. Wait, hold up. Let me see. Who they got there for Fig? You saying he fighting someone like a Tomoki Kameda or something like that? For the WBA featherweight championship? Because remember, some people were saying that he would be involved in the fight card for Canelo versus Mbili, in that we could have had a unification between Espinoza and Figueroa. Now you mean to say that that's going to be all shot down? Oh man, that's going to suck. Okay, he said that Jimmy Lennon Jr.'s mic wasn't working for the scores after 4 rounds, but he said 40-36 for Carrington. He said, hey, yeah, Kameda. Oh man, I don't know, man. Maybe, he probably giving Brandon Figueroa some good money to travel over to Japan, man. Damn. But man, we can't even get a unification. We still can't get a unification over there at 126. Come on, man. That's nasty work. And that was my thing too, right? Because I did talk about that as well with it was brought up in the post-fight presser there with Bruce Carrington. He said, I guess given with their performance, maybe these other world title holders will be more inclined to be fighting me now. So I don't know, but at least for me, maybe an Angelo Leo fight could be, in the cards. But remember, Angelo Leo was supposed to have his fight over in Atlanta. He was supposed to be fighting in Atlanta, right? Oh man, see that, and that's nasty work. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's just a featherweight division just not have had, any of these unifications, man. And we gotta, make this stuff happen, man. Shout out to Z Pacino in the building and Lance Meyer in the building, here for the Boxing Source podcast here, man. Like I said, y'all watching live on YouTube, hit the like button. Y'all watching on Rumble, hit the subscribe button or whatever it is. Support the Boxing Source. We try to, give these podcasts and content to you as much as we can out here. But see, and all right, I did make sure that I did grade the performance here from Bruce Carrington. So, topic, he can't get on me because it did say it was like a C performance basically. Shout out to my guy Smitty in the building. He says that is Top Rank 100% confident in Carrington, hence why he hasn't been put in these fights. Oh, damn, good question. Very good question. Oh man, see, I would have to, man, I might have to go into the archives here a little bit, because the thing with Shushu Carrington was I had an article when they had the thing as far as like Top Rank signing with the Zone. I put up an article on the boxingsource.net where I said, okay, now that they're pretty much like in the works of having these these fights, right? What would be fights that could be in the works or whatever it is. So my thing was, okay, if you could have these things happening, then which would be possible matchups, right? I had 5 of them that were on slate. Five fights that I wanted to see if they could have happen. Espinosa versus Carrington, Norman versus Tiger Johnson. I'll talk about that. Navarrete versus Oshaki Foster, Murataya versus Mason, and Teo, this is at the time, Teo versus Keyshawn. Out of those 5, the 2 that I was told that would be possibilities were Norman versus Tiger and Navarrete versus Oshaki Foster. Okay, so as far as like Bruce Carrington and Rafael Espinosa, they were just like saying, nah, they weren't. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't know if that fight will be taking place anytime soon. Although, again, like I mentioned with their deal with the Zone, if the Zone says, hey, can you go ahead and make Espinosa versus Carrington, so we at least have something that people be interested in. We'll see. We'll see. Okay, Smitty. Hey. All right. We'll top it up after this joint. We'll top it up after this joint for real. Sigurd Dance Move here on the live chat says Espinosa beats everyone at 126 pounds. If Inoue moves to 126, then that would be a 50-50 fight. Hey, I'm gonna say this. If Inoue moves up to 126 and fights Espinosa, I may lean towards Espinosa winning that fight. But that's a whole nother story. All right. Hey, okay. I got you, Smitty. I got you. So, but like back to that thing there with Carrington and Rene Palacios. Like I said, Palacios is there as a pro box fighter. So you'll probably see him, back on the pro box TV thing. Here later on down the line, probably later this year. But for Bruce Carrington, again, like I said, you gotta see like how this Top Rank the Zone deal works out, and then once you do, then you'll be able to sort itself out. But at least from this performance, we gotta see a little bit more there from Bruce Carrington. Yeah, I did have the whole little promo with Bruce Carrington and him getting his trading cards, before the fight. But again, it doesn't, absolve, these fighters from criticism. Okay. There's no perfect fighter. There's no flawless fighter. Okay. They will get criticized. And there will be one fighter that will be also criticized here that, of course, has been one fighter that has been a focus from this particular, I guess, media entity for some time. But we'll talk about that here. I need to get into these last two fights. All right, Tiger Johnson versus Chris Guerrero. Tiger Johnson, they're at 147 pounds. His going up there and building up his ranking and his I guess his name of sorts. They're in the 147-pound division. Of course he had been there at competing around 140 at the start of his career. Then he goes up to 147 here recently. He had the bout against Jensen Bocachica in Norfolk last year, right? That he basically won every round, but Bocachica made it like a real sloppy fight, okay? And, some people were like saying, okay, yeah, he's moving up there to 147, but, kind of like pump the brakes on him a little bit after that fight. And then he had the fight against Nicholas Flores that was on ProBox last November, where he just absolutely blasted Nicholas Flores and got a TKO victory. And that was like that was like one of the more impressive wins around that, that contendership status, or like if you see those fights on ProBox TV or maybe the Zone or whatever it is. But I thought that was like one of the more impressive performances there, because Nicholas Flores at 147 pounds was climbing up the WBO rankings at that time. So that fight was for the NABO welterweight championship, and for Tiger Johnson to get that win and get that stoppage, that shot him up the rankings there quickly within the 147-pound division. Now he goes up against Chris Guerrero, who is coming in there undefeated, 16-0. But he was like based in Canada. We chopped it up as far as like talking with Chris Guerrero sometime back before this fight, and him getting ready, and that he had all of those fights over in Canada, right? But that's completely different than fighting someone like a Tiger Johnson. And from that point, he was like immediately overmatched against Tiger Johnson. Now, did see someone say earlier that they wasn't really impressed too much with Tiger Johnson's performance. I thought he was I thought he did very well here in this particular bout. I think it was just something to the point of where, okay, yeah, we know that he was much better than Chris Guerrero, but is it to where he could just get him out of there? And that's the thing about it, was that he couldn't quite get Chris Guerrero out of there. I didn't really see that much resistance there from Chris Guerrero over the course of that fight. So where it's like, okay, now let's see Tiger Johnson, do what he did against Nicholas Flores and get him out of there. And it wasn't like Chris Guerrero was doing holding and kind of trying to get away from Tiger Johnson and all that type of stuff. Nah, he was pretty much there for Tiger Johnson. It's just that Tiger Johnson just had a couple of moments there here and there, a few times where he did hurt Chris Guerrero, but didn't knock him down. But he ends up getting the win. Okay, unanimous decision win, close to a clean sweep. Two judges had one round for Chris Guerrero. Okay, of course, he did talk about fighting a Devin Miles Haney. And yes, this stems from the whole little situation that happened in New York City in January. Well, I'm here to tell y'all that fight ain't happening. I'm sorry, that fight is not happening. As a media person, you want to be as upfront and real as possible. That fight ain't happening. It's not. The only way that they could have something like that go down is if they try to force the situation like how they have the WBO ordering Devin Haney and Keyshawn Davis right now. Okay. But that is not happening. So with that being said, for Tiger Johnson, there are a couple of fighters that are out there that are rated within the WBO that are top ranked fighters. Okay. And they are both rated above Tiger Johnson right now. One of them is Rohan Polanco. Okay. Now the thing with Rohan Polanco, right? Um he was what was it? He was supposed to be fighting on January. He was supposed to fight on January 31st, but that fight got scratched. So he ended up having a fight in May over in Puerto Rico. It ended up going the full 10 rounds. Um as far as like right now, I think that would be a pretty good matchup there for Tiger Johnson against Rohan Polanco. I don't mind it. That could be a fight that Top Rank could put together. But I don't know. Maybe I need to make a phone call of sorts or an email and be like, hey, what about these matchups as some ideas for a fight card next up for Top Rank? Because yeah, you could have a number of potential matchups that are out there within some of these divisions. It's just a matter of can they put together a full fight card while splitting up a number of these top level fights. Who knows? But for Tiger Johnson, right? He's been there, with Bomac. I think it's been a couple of fights now. He was with a previous trainer there. That is Prentice Brewer. But they ended up splitting, parting ways and things like that. So now that is why you do have Tiger Johnson there, over in the B&B Boxing Academy with Brian Bomac McIntyre. And so I want to see what Tiger Johnson does against a number of these contenders that are there in the welterweight division. As I mentioned, you do have Rohan Polanco that's out there. You do also have a former world champion that is there in the WBO rankings by the name of Brian Norman Jr., who did fight in Norfolk in May and had a pretty much easy work. It was easy work for him. Everybody knew it was going to be easy work. So he is there at number 2 in the WBO. I would not mind a fight between Tiger Johnson and Brian Norman Jr. And again, that was one of the fights that I mentioned. There is one of the 5 fights for Top Rank to see if they could put together. So I would like to see that fight take place. I wouldn't mind it at all. But will it materialize? I don't know. But for Tiger Johnson, as far as like his performance against Chris Guerrero, I would give it a B. I would give it a B. I thought that he'll perform very well, particularly in the first half of the fight. But again, I thought that he kind of showed himself to be much better than Chris Guerrero, and he just was able to have an impressive showing for the fight fans there in Cleveland. That's his hometown of Cleveland. But it wasn't, like what we saw against Nicholas Flores. He just absolutely obliterated Nicholas Flores in his last fight. But we didn't necessarily get that here against Chris Guerrero. Okay? So here's with that. Now, I wanted to get to this last fight that was on the card. You had Derek Scooter Davis there against Carlos Ramos. Okay? Derek Scooter Davis there in the lightweight division, going into this bout at 11-0 with 10 wins by way of knockout. They're at 24 years old. He was the Boxing Source 2025 Prospect of the Year. Okay. Of course, he's seen him be active in 2025, particularly with what happened in his bout against Jamal Johnson at the Barclays Center in March of last year, which put him in a position to be signed by Top Rank. And once he got signed by Top Rank, he ended up having one fight on the Top Rank card, got a KO victory. Then had a few more fights, that had been, basically under, Pro Box or, Jeter Promotions, got stoppage victories there, The fight that he had before this one against Carlos Ramos, he was in Baltimore, and it was his first bout that was scheduled for 8 rounds, and he didn't step in the ring until 1:30 in the morning on that fight night. Okay, it did go to full 8 rounds. He did win by unanimous decision in that. Okay, here against Carlos Ramos, first fight that y'all seen on TNT, on True TV, and pretty much on the Zone. Okay, it started off with with Derek Scooter Davis trying to be Derek Scooter Davis. But as I mentioned with the whole thing with Abdullah Mason, when you are a fighter that's a young fighter that has built up their record, winning, 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 but not only that, you're also stopping these guys. You're beating them up, you're stopping them, you're knocking them out. Once you get to a point where you're fighting a guy that isn't going down or isn't showing that he's hurt against what you're throwing at him, then you really see what the fighter is made of or what other adjustments he can make. Okay, so with Derek Scooter Davis, what I saw was that he was doing what he usually does against his opponents. Is starts off with the jab, tries to walk down his opponent, gets within mid-range or within close range, works the body, throws off to the body, and then see if he could, break down his opponent and, end up hurting him or stopping him or whatever it is. But when you're going up against a guy in like a Carlos Ramos, who this was a fighter that has over 20 professional fights in his record before going into this bout. Scooter had not fought anyone that had that amount of experience in any point of his career. Okay, this guy is born in Ecuador, based in Spain. Had a fight against Henry LeBron back in 2023. So he's been in a few bouts that have been scheduled for 10 rounds. Had one that was, earlier this year that was scheduled for 10 rounds. It went 6, but still was scheduled for 10 rounds. But you kind of like get the idea of like, okay, this guy has been working himself to fights where he's been in 10 round scheduled bouts. So you're not going to have someone that may end up, fading off unless if you really have those abilities or, that skill level to really overwhelm this opponent, right? So it's one thing to kind of like see what you're doing and seeing it land, but if that opponent responds and he's able to throw back, you're gonna have to really like adjust to that. And for Scooter Davis, you kind of like seeing that he does need some work on a few things. Okay, he'll probably admit it. He'll admit it to himself. But I've known a few fans of Scooter Davis that either were there in attendance or watching. They said, "Hey, that was not the shark that they have seen over the course of his career. Going up to this point, and that you've seen him getting caught with punches that people feel like he shouldn't be getting caught with." But he just had like defensive lapses of sorts. He kind of like faded. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say faded, but his activity level wasn't up there. It wasn't up. It wasn't up to par is what some people would kind of like see, as far as like throwing the jabs, throwing combinations. Like we really didn't see that much from him. We seen like ones and 1-2s and that type of thing there from Scooter Davis. Not anything where he was like throwing 4 or 5 punch combinations or whatever it is. But you kind of seen there from an offensive standpoint that it looked like he wanted to just, break down the Carlos Ramos, but not like, turn it up unless you seen like a couple of instances where he tried to do that. Maybe I've seen like 1 4-punch combination, but outside of that, you really didn't see that much. And this went through the full 8 rounds, and you did have him winning by unanimous decision. Almost the same scores as what he got in the last fight. 2 scores of 78-74 and one score of 77-75. Me looking at it live after the fight was over, I called it 5 rounds to 3 for Scooter Davis. So one judge, I had it just like one judge, 5 rounds to 3. Could be 6 rounds to 2, but it's one thing when you expect something from a fighter that you kind of seen win and win and win and win. And like I was saying before these fights took place, I wanted to have this as a knockout win for Scooter Davis, and it didn't necessarily happen. And he was getting caught a few times. Topic, you were saying Davis didn't adjust from trying to walk down a counterpuncher. Like I said with the main event, with Abdullah Mason, you've seen elements of him making adjustments as far as like walking down upper bell to where he wasn't straight and upright, to where if you're not throwing while walking your opponent down, you give your opponent the opportunity to hit you before you try to get something to him. And that was the thing that I saw with Derek Scooter Davis, was that he kind of like had some instances where he had like a high guard, almost like a high guard, like how I would say David Morrell Jr. has a high guard. And we critiqued his high guard because it was more of like, it wasn't a tight high guard. It was more like an open high guard to where you could, throw a straight jab that could go right in between and kind of like hit you in the chin or whatever it is. Or you could have a hook where you could go around that guard and still hit the side of the head. So having that high guard, but looking like it's open, you could still get hit a good few times with a jab, with a hook, with an uppercut. They're within range. And when you just have that and not move with it, that poses a problem. Now, there are instances where, Scooter Davis did kind of move, kind of slip and counter and things like that. But you've seen elements there from Carlos Ramos where he was able to answer back from the punches that Davis was throwing at him, And I didn't like it at all. As far as like a grade for this, but I think, man, I would say C minus. Some would say a D, but I would say C minus because I know that Derek Davis can do better than that. I know he can, And yes, we've heard about people seeing what's reacting to it and peers reacting to it and things like that. It happens, and this is part of the game. Especially when we have just about every one of these fights on TV or some form of TV right now. Like to have that be the first fight on TNT, U.S. national television, you're out there in the spotlight, and you're a guy that's saying that, hey, I'm there to show like I'm that dude. I've had multiple conversations with Derek Scooter Davis over the years or over the past couple of years. And of course, like recently before, this fight, so I want to see how he does or how he responds to this. And I also would like to know what some folks within the game think about his performance, because I know I expected more, from him. I expected more from him. I just think that he could do a lot better. Yes, I did see Mr. Carmel Moulton make a comment in reference to Derek Scooter Davis's performance, but I will say this, okay? Let's be real with it. Carmel, he should be having these fights. How is it that Carmel Moulton, remember, Carmel Moulton is one of the most highly touted fighters that have been coming out of amateurs. From him, from, Zakeem Moses. Like, it was those two that were pretty much coming out of that class, right? Zakeem Moses, has been what? He's just about to be what? He's going to be having this like 8 fights. So, think about it is like Moses and Moten, they haven't had but 8 or 9 fights. Scooter Davis has had about 12 fights already. What is that? 12 fights already, right? So to kind of like make those type of comments, my thing is you got to be able to have fights. Like you got to be able to have fights. Now with Zakeem Moses, he signed with Matchroom Boxing, so and we seen him over in Houston for his last fight. There, at the end of what? At the end of May. So he's at least he got something signed. For Carmel Moulton, I don't know what his situation is right now. So we got to see if he's going to be able to be put in position to have fights at least more than 3 times a year. You know what I mean? I like he's had 2 fights in 2025 and then that one fight in 2026 in February. He was supposed to have one that was I think he was supposed to have another fight this year that ended up falling through. And we all know that he's had some issues here and there as far as like what weight he's going to be fighting at. So I don't know, but making those comments on social media is one thing, but my thing is let's just see you in the ring. That's that. But yeah, that's my assessment there of Scooter Davis. I want to see more from him. Hopefully we get something where I don't know, they might tone him down a little bit. But I don't see how they could do that because the thing is that was his second 8 round bout. That was his second 8 round bout. So that's where he's gonna be at from this point forward. Like I don't know if they're gonna revert him back down to 6, but it just depends on where they have him. If they have him, still on a like say for example, if he's on the top rank card, they might have him on an 8 round bout. But if he's not on the top rank card for his next bout, they might put him back down to 6. I don't know, but it's a whole lot of elements and things that have to go down and happen in order for that to take place. All right, so there's that. Now went through that whole card. I talked about being out there at the Wolstein Center. They said it's a pretty good sized venue, over 13,000 capacity. They had 10,000 there at the event for it. So, they might be able to try to work something to get, Abdullah Mason back there on it. So, we'll see how that goes there. But yeah, yeah, hey, Topic, like I know, it is a tricky situation there for Scooter Davis, because like how they've kind of signed, like how they signed them, after March of last year, and then you had that fight that was over in Norfolk. Then they had Top Rank had their situation, so they said, hey, let's put him in and see if we could, make a phone call, talk with this guy here, we've been working with for a good little minute, and seeing if he could be put him on for a couple of his cards, and that's what they did. To keep him busy, or put him on for a pro box card. But with this situation still going on with Top Rank, it's not like I hadn't really seen the details of their deal with the zone, so it's not like you say, hey, it could be something like a matchroom deal. Who knows if it's something like a even a Golden Boy deal? Who knows? But it's more about, hey, if y'all can put fight cards together, we'll put them on. So that's what we got to see there, at least for our Top Rank. And for Scooter Davis, I don't know. Maybe we'll scale him back or whatever. But Topic, who that we could go to the gym. We could go to the gym for getting some things, and that we could reach out to a couple of people here and there in reference to this particular performance. But the other thing too, though, right, is for y'all that have been watching at home, that was the thing that I didn't necessarily get the opportunity to see or check out. and I don't even know if they would have had the thing on replay on TNT, right? I didn't get, the assessment from, you know, Terrence Crawford or Tim Bradley or Sean Porter when it came to that performance from Derek Scooter Davis on that. So I'll look into that. I'll see if they have something on it, see what they say, and probably respond to it or whatever it is. So, but we'll see how that goes on that. All right. But for me, like I said, from what I've seen from Scooter Davis, I know he can do better. I know he can. Like he has that ability. So we'll see if he you'll get that done here later on down the line. All right. Yes, you did have two of the Mason brothers also added on to this fight card, where Abdullah Mason and Ibrahim Mason scored wins there with Ibrahim Mason getting a TKO victory and Abdullah Mason getting a decision victory. So that was a good 3-0 there for the Mason brothers on that. So that covers the thing there for that fight card. So now I gotta do a run through of what we had as far as like stories are concerned. Now, one thing that has been a topic of conversation in the boxing world is this potential super fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. Okay, we are slated to have Anthony Joshua fighting later this month. Okay, against Christian Pranga. Okay, Tyson Fury is lined up to fight Marius Wach. That is supposed to be in Thailand. That is on the 24th of July. On the 25th of July, you have Anthony Joshua versus Christian Pranga in Jeddah. Okay. Some people have or are having doubts in reference to Anthony Joshua and Christian Pranga. I don't see how that's the case. Listen, I seen Christian Pranga live. Okay, this guy has been. What was this bout that I went to? The Juan Torres bout back in January of 2025, and I should have article back then from being at that. That was like the main event, I think, of the the King. It wasn't King's Promotions. It was Cali Reyes there that had something out there at the 2300. So you had Christian Pranga against this dude named Juan Torres that was 11-7-1, and he got a TKO victory on that. Listen, Christian Pranga has been having like 8-round bouts and maybe a 10-round bout here and there, but come on, man, he's been fighting like the Atlantic City, Philadelphia, Newark circuit. Going up against Anthony Joshua, come on, man, that should be easy work. I see this comment, man. Come on, man. You know what? I'll talk about that here too in a little bit because hopefully we have a fight that some people have been looking for. But I want to get back to this thing here with Anthony Joshua and Christian Pranga. That should be easy work for Anthony Joshua. I know that he had the situation that happened there with the car accident that took two of his great friends. And that kind of like threw off the schedule of what was planned here for 2026. Okay. And thing was, like, they could have had Anthony Joshua. How about this? You could have had Anthony Joshua fighting Rico Verhoeven. That was actually the plan. The plan was for Anthony Joshua, or at least that's what I was reported. Anthony Joshua was going to be having of course, one of those bouts where he was going to be the guy in Giza, okay, to fight Rico Verhoeven. And because of, what happened there in the accident and him, going through recovery and all of that, that threw everything off as far as like that is concerned. So that is why you had Alexander Usyk fighting Rico Verhoeven instead. And that threw off the schedule there for Alexander Usyk. So now you got Anthony Joshua here fighting Christian Pranga. You got Tyson Fury that is slated to fight Marius Rock. Okay. I don't know why that fight is scheduled for 12 rounds. They say it's scheduled for 12 rounds. For what? Like, what are we doing here? This ain't no damn title bout. Okay. So with that being said, if these two guys end up winning their respective bouts, then we should have this whole thing with Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, right? And people are saying, yeah, let's go ahead and have this fight over in England. Well, if you've seen reports over the past few weeks or the past couple of months, they're saying that, oh, this fight could potentially not be in the UK or England. And yes, you've had some resistance of sorts from Mr. Eddie Hearn. But I've heard something here about this. So what I'll say is this, okay? There is a possibility that this fight, and I'm saying this is a valid possibility, that the fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury will not happen in England, particularly in London, for a couple of reasons, okay? One of them is, and the main thing is Netflix. Netflix wants to have the rights to have or broadcast this bout or be the number one network to broadcast it. Yes, we've seen Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua on Netflix. Yes, we've seen Tyson Fury versus Arslan Bekmambetov on Netflix. So they've been, and they had their, that whole little series with Tyson Fury, or the Fury little thing that they got on Netflix, right? So they've been doing the work in order to have that fight be on Netflix. Now, with them doing that, right, they want to have the actual fight happen at a certain time period, okay? So that it would accommodate all of their subscribers, or as many subscribers that they have. What is that, over 300,000? 300,000. What am I saying? 300 million, okay? 300 million. So what they're saying is they want to have this particular fight at midnight, around midnight or 1 a.m. local time. What that would mean is local time in England. So, for example, if they wanted to have that bout in London, they would say, let's put this bout at this particular time in London. Here's a problem, or here's one problem, okay? London, or pretty much the UK, has a strict curfew policy that they can't have certain events run past a certain time period or a certain time out there in the UK. Now, I'm going to bring this up. If I'm not mistaken, when they had the bout between Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois, they were pushing to have that fight start at a certain time to make sure that as many people were able to get out of the area by like a 12 or 1 or something like that. So that's why it looked like it was around like 10:30 or something whenever they did have that fight start between Joshua and Dubois. But usually we don't have that for boxing events like that, especially in the U.S. So unless they make that adjustment there in the UK or London, that makes it less likely that the fight's going to take place there. Now, the other thing is, if they are trying to have that particular fight around November, December, January, they can't have it in the UK. There is no venue, none, zero, zilch, nada, that is big enough, that has a retractable roof or whatever it is. Wembley Stadium is partially retractable. What is it? Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. That's not. They don't have a closed roof. They've had a fight over there at Tottenham, over in that time period. That was like Tyson Fury versus Derek Chisora. That was an absolute mess outside. They're not going to have a fight of that magnitude at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in like a November or December if you're going to be having some crazy conditions out there. That's not going to happen. So if they are looking to have Fury and Joshua fight each other before the end of this year, they may end up having it in Las Vegas. Whether it's through Turkey Al Sheikh or Sela or whatever, if they're going to have that fight take place this year, it's not going to be in the UK. It's not. And that's gonna really, make a number of fight fans over in England really frustrated. Now, my thing is, but the other thing I've been kind of like saying is, if they're going to be trying to make this particular fight, I think that they're going to have a 2-fight deal. That both of these guys are going to fight each other more than once. So the thing about it is that, yeah, you want to see about having 2 fights between these guys, but that first fight, they should have it over in England. And even if it takes them waiting until February or March of next year, maybe. But the way that they have this, there's probably no way around it. They probably have these deals in place to say, hey, we got y'all set to fight in July. We have one part of this deal done where both of y'all have a one-off. After that one-off, y'all going to have to fight each other, and you're going to have to do it within this certain time period. So I'm like, hey, if that's going to be the case, good luck for fans over in England, because it doesn't look like it's going to happen in England. Hopefully things could change, but I don't know about that. He said, the topic asks, Joshua has been inactive over the years. Does he still have that fighting hunger? It's not going to be, hey, we've seen what he was doing there with Alexander Usyk, training with Alexander Usyk. So maybe that has kind of like come back, to him. But it still remains to be seen. We still have to see him in the ring. Okay. As far as like Alexander Usyk is concerned, he did make that recent announcement that he has given up all of his world titles. What is that? The WBA, right? He had all but the WBO, right? So the WBC, the WBA, and the IBF belts are all vacant. I mean, and, given the situation, he's, like I said, he fought everybody, like I said, he did have the fight against Rico Verhoeven, and mainly he had that fight not just because of the whole situation with Anthony Joshua, but it's like, is he gonna, was he going to be fighting Daniel Dubois again, for that WBO belt? No. Was he going to be fighting Murat Gasayev for what? Was he going to be fighting Agin Kabayel? So it's like, okay, either fight Agin Kabayel over in Germany or fight Rico Verhoeven in Egypt. And they say, hey, we got this amount of money for you to fight Rico Verhoeven in Egypt. He's fighting Rico Verhoeven in Egypt. Then we see what happens in that fight. So now it's like, okay, do I still go forward with fighting Agin Kabayel or potentially having a rematch with Rico Verhoeven or fighting Deontay Wilder? I'd say that choice was pretty much easy there for Alexander Usyk. Like, either fight Rico Verhoeven and you could get potentially more money, or fight Deontay Wilder. Like, some people thought he was going to fight, who he was going to fight in April of this year. So we could potentially see Alexander Usyk versus Deontay Wilder before the end of this year. All right. So hopefully we get more information on that when it comes to Alexander Usyk. But as far as like these world titles are concerned, they're going to be all split up. You're only going to see like Frank Sanchez versus, I don't know, man. Well, that's the thing. Philip Hrgovic is supposed to be fighting Moses Atama, right? So Frank Sanchez will be fighting someone like a Bagadir Jalolov or something like that. Agin Kabayel, he was elevated to full champion, so they had a whole little thing for him. Murat Gasev is supposed to be fighting this weekend. So he's just going to be basically just the world champion. There for the WBA. So that's the whole thing with the heavyweight situation. But for Usyk, he's more about just getting the money and calling it a day. All right, so there's that. As far as like what else is left, you got O'Shaquie Foster, having comments in reference to potentially fighting a Vasyl Lomachenko. Okay, um, I wouldn't mind about, especially if it's at 130 pounds. Okay, O'Shaquie Foster is there as the WBC champion. Okay, and he says, "quote If you're coming back, let's get it done. I got the title and I'll put it up. We can make it happen." That is the words of O'Shaquie Foster there. That is coming through, what is that, Ring Magazine? I wouldn't mind that bout, especially at 130 pounds. I think for Vasyl Lomachenko, for the short career that he has had, I think he was at his best at 130 pounds. Once he reached 135, I thought that would be kind of like his limit or whatever it is. And that if he went up against some certain people, that his movement and his skill set wouldn't be enough. And that ended up being the case. My guy Dre is in the building. He's back, from Cleveland. Was able to, of course, hang out with Dre there, over the weekend. Yeah, I'm still out here. I'm still in Cleveland area, man. I'm still in Cleveland here, leaving tomorrow morning. Goodness, I just thought about the whole situation there for tomorrow morning. All right, so yeah, so you do have that whole situation, like I said, with the heavyweight division, and talked about here with O'Shaquie Foster potentially fighting Vasyl Lomachenko. And the thing too, though, with O'Shaquie Foster, of course, he had this win over Raymond Ford in Houston to defend the WBC title. I did say that he should be lined up to have a unification bout with Emmanuel Navarrete, but coming from the previous year or whatever it is, they had not been able to make that fight happen. And as you see this year, they were able to make a unification between Emmanuel Navarrete and Eduardo Nunez, but not Emmanuel Navarrete and O'Shaquie Foster. Now, I still don't think that unification is on slate or lined up to happen next, but I've heard that there might be something even bigger for O'Shaquie Foster coming up. And they're saying that it might come up for October. Now, it might disappoint some fans, but it might have some fans be like, oh, snap, they're actually going to have this happen? Well, it kind of like deals with O'Shaquie Foster's last fight. He fought Raymond Ford. And for those that do follow boxing or follow these fighters, particularly Raymond Ford and O'Shaquie Foster, this fight kind of like stemmed from something happening between O'Shaquie Foster and another fighter of note that was a former WBC and WBO super featherweight champion that moved up to lightweight and won a championship at lightweight and is currently a world champion at super lightweight. So, after having this fight between O'Shaquie Foster and Raymond Ford, and O'Shaquie Foster won that fight by decision, he immediately called out this person, and that person stepped in the ring, and they both had a verbal altercation. At that time, I didn't really think that fight could happen. Now I'm hearing that it could be a possibility over in Newark. Oops, did I just give a clue right there? I think I did. I will have to follow up with the source that told me about this, but if there's any chance that that fight happens, I wouldn't mind it at all. I like it. I would like the fight. I think it's good for both of them. And if they do announce that fight, I'm going to be there. I will be there for that fight. You better believe I'll be there for that fight. So that is one rumor of sorts there. Yes, Osaki Foster potentially fighting in October over in Newark. So you kind of get who I'm referring to when I say Newark. All right. Have to see if I can wind this down. Almost here for like 2 hours. Jeez, man. I can't believe I'll talk for almost 2 hours here, talking about these fights and everything like that, but in other stories. But the last thing that I wanted to touch on was this whole thing with Mr. Bill Haney and his son, Devin Miles Haney. Apparently, Mr. Bill Haney says that, hey, I talked with Al Heyman, and inshallah, we could be having a big fight in 2027 or whatever how he talks or whatever it is. That he could potentially have his son Devin Miles Haney fighting Gervonta Tank Davis. But another thing that he said was that Al Heyman told him that Tank Davis would not be ready until 2027. I don't. That's Bill Haney saying that. Like, for me, if there was any instance where Tank Davis is not stepping in the ring until 2027, that is not a good look, man. One thing I don't like is inactivity from fighters, especially inactivity from fighters that have a elevated status in the sport of boxing. Now, when I talk about Tank Davis, yes, I know that he was the WBA lightweight champion. That's why I referred to that thing earlier when the WBA did have that title vacant. He was the WBA lightweight champion. He has not fought since March 1st, 2025 at the Barclays Center against Lamont Roach Jr. He ended up fighting Jake Paul last year. And it looks like who knows what could be on slate for him this year. There have been potential matchups for him, haven't materialized, haven't, developed, haven't taken place. We're in July. We don't know if he's going to be ready for a fight, I guess, maybe later this year or whatever. But we're not seeing anything where he's close to having a fight take place. So for Tank Davis, if he ends up fighting the Devin Haney, maybe it happens next year. We would think it would happen this year, but to have Tank Davis fight a Devin Haney and it would end up being next year and he be inactive for pretty much 2 years, nasty work. Absolutely nasty work. And for Devin Haney, yes, we do have that order that's in place from the WBO that he should be in negotiations to fighting Keyshawn Davis. Now, as far as like that fight happening, maybe. Be an interesting matchup, but I don't know if it's going to end up happening. It should. I'm like this. Devin Haney should be fighting this year. Should be no way that you come off the momentum of defeating Brian Norman Jr. for the WBO welterweight championship and you're not ended up having any fights with anybody this year. You could have had a unification with Ryan Garcia in a rematch. Or you certainly could have had a unification with Rolando Rolly Romero in May of this year. That was all but sealed. And according to Bill Haney, he said the numbers were good. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. So you mean to tell me that you could have had either a unification bout with Rolando Rolly Romero or with Ryan Garcia, and it didn't necessarily happen? Okay, that's out the window. So now you're pretty much like in a situation where, okay, you end up fighting a mandatory or have a mandatory defense, or you just end up not fighting this year. That I don't understand that. I don't understand that situation. So for me, I think the whole thing with Devin Haney and Tank Davis, I think that's all talk. At least right now, that's all talk. Until we actually see something serious that says, "Hey, we got something as far as like actual motion from both parties, especially with Tank Davis," then I just see it as something that's like filler talk. You're gonna end up seeing Devin Haney fighting somebody else. Hopefully, it's something by the beginning of fall, like around September or something like that. But you would think with Devin Haney having the momentum of having one of the more impressive wins of 2025, trying to get back in the ring and kind of like showing himself to be one of those more talented fighters, I guess, in the sport. Yes, I do have Haney on the list of the Boston Source pound for pound top 16, which I should go ahead and update since I haven't updated it in a month. But like these guys gotta be active. They gotta be having these fights, and that's pretty much the bottom line to it. Okay, um, that's pretty much been the rundown here. For this edition of the Boston Source podcast, because for everyone that's been able to listen in live, and hit the like button if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button. Let people know about this this podcast here. Of course, you can follow on social media through Facebook, Instagram, X, and also TikTok. And soon I will be posting up a commercial of sorts, or maybe just a video of sorts, in reference to the trading cards, because I've had the request to do that. So once I get settled in, once I'm back around home base, then I'll be able to do that, and y'all be able to get more information on the trading cards, so that I'll be able to get more of these out for people that are interested, and I will have some special made cards there that will be part of the packs too. All right, so that's what I got for y'all. Until next time, I will catch y'all later, y'all. Peace out.